and then try to watch as people come in, and I'll get this uploaded and we're going to get started. All right. I just need to know that you can see the screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, this is being recorded, and so as we move along in the discussion board, feel free to ask questions. If you don't want to be identified, put in a fake name, or you can ask us by email another time. We have had a lot of people want to be part of this and not able to. So we are going to put it in the public domain. Turn off that if I can. So more people can hear the lecture. So here's the aim. I really think using reflection points, which are moments of questions where I'm going to ask you to ponder what your answer might be, are opportunities for us to do self-assessment. We're so often busy doing that we don't take time to think about where we are in the moment, let alone within the group or the setting that we're working in. So this is really an opportunity to go on a journey of self-assessment related to questions primarily focused on conflict and leadership. I'm going to share some resources on both conflict negotiation and the art of persuading others. And then we're going to end with some fun opportunities for giveaways, some Q&A, and we have some announcements to share with you tonight. So let's take off. Here's a scenario that I want you to think about. And I would love to have a couple people share their thoughts if you're willing to. What would you do if you were one of 10 midwives in a busy practice? Two of the midwives refused to work with students or any new hires, and the practice director is letting the action slide. Any comments on that?
I think a good approach is always to find out what the hesitancy is and where somebody's mindset is anytime there's a hesitancy to do some sort of action like.
Yeah, so who are you going to talk to? Are you going to talk to the practice director or to the midwives that are refusing? Because
I
you're
think
one.
I'd probably ask the midwives directly, maybe one-on-one, casually.
Yeah. Would anybody approach the practice director? Wow, we have 46 people on here and nobody would go to the practice director. That's interesting. I
Well,
think
I'll help you out, Ginger. I would talk to all three.
there we go. Yeah,
I would explore why the practice director isn't fulfilling her job responsibilities as a director, and I would also inquire and see what I could learn about what was number one, keeping internally or personally, keeping those other two from wanting to participate in what is essential in our profession, and also exploring a little bit about what makes them think that they are excluded from that.
yeah. I think that that's a good point. And I also want to say, in many scenarios, some people never say anything. And that is a response, right? You just keep your head down, you go to work, you do your thing, and you let the conflict be handled by other people, right? That is a response. That is actually a very common response, is to default to not want to get in the middle of any potential issue that might create more use of your energy, right? So there's no right or wrong answer here, but what I want you to do is write down what you would do and then explore why you chose that answer. And is there a possibility that you might think of it differently when you learn some of the things you're going to learn tonight? Okay. So here are common challenges that we hear every month, honestly, probably every week across all types of midwife practices. Poor team dynamics, little transparency, and our lack of collegiality. Those three are very different concepts, but they all sort of circle around how the group works as a team. Internal, right? Internal issues. Failure to share the practice story with key stakeholders. That is the inability to know how to communicate outside of your team, to the chief, to the C-suite, to your students. I mean, whoever those stakeholders are, the inability to really know the value of doing that, but also how to do it effectively. Low engagement in the practice beyond work hours. We've pretty much determined that the average work week for a midwife that's full-time is 52 hours a week. Now, we do know there are people who work less and more. We're just looking at an average based on how many clients we've worked with over so many years. But depending on where someone is in their life in the moment, or maybe what they feel about the job, they may be given their time. Hopefully you're not clocking in and out, but that is it. That is the minimum expected, and that is the minimum that's being given, which means there isn't a lot of incentive to want to do much more about what this practice is doing other than the job description. And when that happens, the practice begins to fall flat of why they exist, which is what we're going to talk about in a minute. And the last one is maybe not just non-invested, but not motivated, not really aware of why there might need to be changes brought forward for a variety of reasons. It's not just work-life balance or salary, but there's not inquisitive questions going on to have a true investment in how quality improvement can be going on in the practice, even if your practice is performing well on all the benchmarks that you use. So the basis of all of the highlighted individuals we're going to talk about tonight, the basis of success is excellent communication. We know that's true in our families. We know that's true in our friendships. It's definitely true the more diverse the stakeholders are that you work with, and the more difficult it is. And so how do you measure excellent negotiation? They're all going to tell you excellent communication. It's by negotiating through the conflict. It is the litmus test. When those challenges or bumps in the road happen, do you avoid them? Or do you figure out a way to walk toward them? Just like that first question. And, are you just going to talk to the midwives who are frustrating everybody? Are you going to gang up on the practice director? Are you going to ask for a team meeting and say, it appears that we have this conflict going on in our practice around an issue that we've been quiet about so far. I think it's time that we explore it together, right? So negotiating through conflict is the litmus test of an effective team. Not only is it that, but defining shared goals, embracing the differences we all bring. Maybe those two midwives are 60 years old and they're too tired to want to teach anymore because they've done it for 40 years and they're passing that work on to other people now. I mean, I don't know. That is a real story, however. I didn't make that up. And we have to be able to demonstrate mutual respect, which is getting harder and harder for a lot of reasons. It's not just birth trauma that's going on with our clients, it's provider trauma. We know that from many, many cases we've worked with of midwives that have been reported, who have had their privileges suspended, who have conflict with physicians. It's very hard out there right now for a lot of people. So how do you approach that conflict? And do you become proactive or wait until it escalates and become reactive? So the next reflection point I want you to think about is, how would you measure your readiness to approach conflict with your work team? Really, really think about that for a minute. And if anybody wants to share, a couple people want to share, that would be great. And it's okay if we don't. But it's an important thing to do a self-assessment about because we can give you as many tools as possible to help you learn how to do this. But there is a mindset that we have to be prepared to adopt, which is the conflict will not, going through the conflict will not be easy, but it may champion ideas and change that you never dreamed about before. So I want to do a quick leadership self-assessment, and this is something I would have you do when we're done. And I'm going to give you an example. You're going to have 2 columns, strengths and weaknesses. And what I want you to do is write phrases or words that describe your traits about being a good leader. Your traits, right? Not what you think somebody else should be doing. So I'll give you my example. And when I shared this with the Massachusetts Midwives, I think Denise was cracking up in the background because she was there. And my husband would probably completely disagree with this, but in the work environment, I really think I'm an exceptionally good listener. I feel like I've sort of always had that trait. Maybe it was debate that gave me that, to stop and listen to the opposing side, to really listen carefully and then to speak. But what I'm not very good at is I can be very quietly impatient, like just sitting there going, why don't you just sort of say something? Or why are we taking so long to do something? And I have to really work on holding that back and not letting it be exposed in a way that could somehow harm the conversation that's going on. So being able to list these qualities about yourself can really help you expedite your ability in conflict and how to go forward in some of the strategies that we're going to give you tonight. So how are we doing? Everybody doing okay? All right. There are 4 resources we're going to talk about tonight with very few slides. And there are 3 authors that we're highlighting in 3 books. And the last one is a resource, the Harvard Business Review. So Simon Sinek came out really in his leadership guru role when I became ACNM president back in 2012, 2013. It was pretty fascinating because he hit the scene fast. And I remember one year wanting to get him to speak at our annual meeting, and it cost $50,000 for 1 hour. The best book you can buy, in my opinion, about being a leader, and even if you're not the leader, being on a team, you want to have an effective leader, right? So all these principles make sense for us to learn. It's called Start With Why. And we're going to talk about that book in just a second. The next book is a classic written in about 2011 or 2012 by a professor named Roger Fisher and his student, William Ury. Now, Ury was a PhD student and Fisher was his graduate guru professor. And as Ury was finishing his doctoral program, they wrote this book called Getting to Yes. It is the seminal book on conflict, negotiation, persuasive discussion. And it's what everybody else riffed off of, including the nursing profession, about how to deal with conflict, right? So every subset has sort of borrowed, stolen, whatever you want to call it, concepts from these 2 guys. And they come from the Harvard School of Law Negotiation Project. This is a group that's been around for a very, very long time, and they put out the most world-renowned negotiators that do world peace talks. It's so funny because last night I was at my undergrad university's holiday party in Kansas City. For those of you who know the Boulevard Brewing Company, that's where we were. Probably the average age there was well over me, and I turned 70, full of 90% lawyers. There were 3 nurses there. I mean, I'd never been to one of these before. So I have to go mingle because I'm now the secretary of our university board of trustees and trying to get money for a nursing building. And I sit down with a couple that I did not know. And who do I sit beside but a professor of peace talks at a university in Kansas City? And I don't know how this happened, but we talked about William Ury for about 45 minutes. and every book these people have written. So it's sort of like fascinating to me that the more you learn about negotiation, the more these names will pop up. William Urey's most recent book, published in October of last year, is called Possible. It is his 40-year journey of his career and how he took his emphasis in anthropology and people behavior, societal behavior, and wove in the art of negotiation to reduce conflict. And he uses examples of his family, his daughter. He uses examples of North Korea, peace talks, the Middle East, and makes it so simplistic that you will finish that book. If you get it on Audible, he's the reader, he narrates it. You'll just go, oh my gosh, these are things I can do tomorrow. I don't really have to practice them. And the last thing I'm going to suggest you do, if you are on a journey to become a leader in a very defined way, or if you are a leader in a defined role, I would highly encourage you to subscribe to the Harvard Business Review. Much of what I have learned over the years has come from phenomenal articles, from research, a variety of tools that they have. I've used their facilitation tools a lot. It's just a fantastic resource to subscribe to. So let's talk about the 3 books. We're going to start with Simon Sinek's Start With Why. When we go to work with practices or affiliates that are trying to accomplish X, often the question is, why do you exist? Right? It's easy to talk about an affiliate for a minute. I've worked with 3 or 4 affiliates. These are affiliates that want to reactivate. So their why is pretty easy to figure out quickly. How do we get people back activated to accomplish something, right? When we work with practices who are struggling, typically, usually you don't call for help if everything's hunky-dory. One of the questions we'll pose is, well, why does your practice exist? Not like because patients need to be seen, but there's a deeper meaning here. And what we're looking for is if the practice has a defined purpose or a defined cause or a vision. And is it something that is in perpetuity? Or is it something that might be modified every couple years based on historical changes like COVID happened, right? Or whatever changes, maybe you have a new OB chief, or maybe your practice grew by 20 or whatever it was, Denise. So something changes that causes the group to need to do a reevaluation of their purpose. And so if you had one, which most practices don't, when did you last reevaluate it? And when did you last really think about what your why might be for this practice? And how it can drive you forward as a team. So Simon Sinek in this book talks about the golden circle. And there is the what, which is the outer circle, the how, and the why. The why is the inner core of what is keeping this team together. So the what is what every organization on the planet knows what they do, right? You're all midwives. You catch babies, you see patients, you are providing services that you've been employed to do. That's your what. You do it every day, you do it without thinking about it, and you don't ever question your what, because that's your job. That's in your contract. Then there's the how. How do you do it? There are things that make you special or set you apart from the competition. If we're thinking of like, you're going to buy a Lexus or you're going to buy a Mercedes, right? How are you different? So when you think about the group that you work with, how are you as a midwife practice different than whoever you're comparing yourself to? And that begins to help you think about your why, which is much more specific. Why you do what you do. It's not the money. It's not the result. It's not the outcomes. It's purpose, the cause, or the belief. It's the very reason why the midwives are there. You are there. We know why you're there from the employer point of view. I say this every day. You're there because you make money for them and it's much less expensive. but what is your why as a team that holds you together to want to work together? And having that conversation becomes your aim, your practice statement. It might be 2 or 3 sentences that we worked with an FQHC that wanted to focus on and highlight and lift up the population they serve, and to be able to provide them a wider array of services than they would get in another population, right? That wasn't being done for them in that FQHC. They were employees going to work, seeing the patients, and that was it. Nobody in the community really knew anything else about them. But to have a team that's cohesive, that's driving forward and doing all the positive things to feel good, to want to stay there, to feel valued, to have higher patient satisfaction, you need to know why you're doing what you're doing. And that needs to be talked about frequently. I would say every year or 2. I didn't realize until probably you'll get more insight into this at the end when I was doing some research that Fisher and Urey actually have done some podcasts together. Not Fisher and Urey, Urey and Cynic. So I'm going ahead of myself here. Fisher and Urey's book called Getting to Yes is really the seminal book about conflict and negotiation. So the theory is you want to address the conflict before it escalates. The longer we wait, the more the opposing parties build their power base and fill in the gaps, whether they're true or not, of what they believe to be true. It happens and it doesn't matter what the conflict is or who it's with, it is how that happens. It's really, really important to understand the interests of all parties. And what they will teach you in this book is it is even to your best strategy to put yourself in the shoes of the opposing party. We did this in debate in high school and college. What are they going to say? What's their evidence? How can I counter that evidence? How can I be more empathetic towards their point of view and yet be able to convince them that maybe there's another way, which is the win-win outcome? What is a solution that acknowledges both parties' points of view and somewhere in the middle brings together this opportunity for both parties to feel like they won something? The discussions need to be based on objective facts. And that's one of the hard things I think as midwives we inherit. Maybe it comes from nursing, maybe it's predominantly female, is the emotional side of our brain is not easily separated from objective conversation. So again, put yourself in this mindset of, I'm coming with these facts, whatever the facts are, patient satisfaction surveys, your RVUs for the year, your actual time worked, whatever the facts are you're bringing forward isn't like, I'm going to pick on you, Crystal, because I can see you. You just worked me so hard. I've worked like 60 hours this week and I just can't work any more than that. Well, prove it, right? And the way you prove it is with a time map. So you have to separate your feelings when you're negotiating from where you want to go. And it's a process of learning. Getting to yes is a framework. It's very specific. There are steps that can guide you through that process, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So this looks confusing, but it's a wonderful sketch by Sasha Chua. So you can see the citation up there of the person who drew this, of a conversation they had with Fisher, Urey, and Patton on the book called Getting to Yes. And it just condenses everything this book helps you try to learn. So the rest of the subtitle is called Negotiating an Agreement Without Giving In, right? It's assuming that you're going to get to the yes that you want. So what's really important is that you don't get locked into your negotiating positions. You can't draw your line in the sand, as one of my sons said in a presentation we did to medical students in residence a week ago on negotiating. You can't go in with your line in the sand until you've actually heard what the other party's going to say, right? You want to learn as much about their interests as possible. that's how you begin to frame how you're going to respond. So there's this great exercise called mirroring, where you try to get the other party to say more than what they have said in their statement. So, Denise, if I ask you this question, can you help me understand why you're not willing to talk about raising my salary?
Can you help me understand?
Yeah. Um, well, we have a tiered model in our HR department, and that's just the way it is.
That's the way it is in the department.
Yeah, that's the way it is. Say it again, Denise.
That's the way it is.
Right. Okay. So mirroring.
I paused intentionally to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, you did a good job.
Mhm.
And that's another art of what goes on here is pausing, but mirroring the last words of the statement somebody has said, not in a derogatory way, but sort of with a tone that goes up in a questioning way. That's called mirroring. And it creates this uncomfortable nature, which Denise was doing very effectively with me, to try to get you to say more because you want to learn more. I want to learn more than that's the HR policy. Like, bullshit. Are you using MGMA data set? Are you using, Sullivan Cotter? Did you just create this on your own and all APPs have this tier set? And then I'm really going to go for that because CNMs are not all APPs. You're wanting to learn as much as you possibly can from the other party in order to come up with creative solutions. And the only way you can come up with multiple solutions, not just one, is to be able to understand as much as possible as why they've created the conflict that you're trying to modify. Does that make sense? Not only are you trying to do your homework and figure out what are the other APPs making, what are their work hours, what's happening in the city, what's happening in the state, you want to try to figure out what's happening internally to be able to learn and zero in even more effectively. So you don't want to see this as a time of conflict. You're not going to war with these people. They're part of your team. You want to focus on cooperation and you want to foster a friendship and a relationship. And that's really hard to do. We've worked with a big practice in the Midwest where the midwives were on one side of the table and the physicians were on the other side of the table. And Dr. Yeast and I couldn't believe they even would look at each other. There was that much hostility you could feel in the room. So you need to try to figure out how to find common ground to build the relationships. And maybe that's patient safety. Just set the floor. We all want to accomplish patient safety and high satisfaction here. And these are some of the things you're going to riff off of that. You need to find what the common interest is. What do people truly value? I am here to say, I don't think it's the mission, vision, and values that you see on the homepage of every employer. I don't even think they know what those are, to be quite honest with you. I think that the interest often lies at the level of monetary issues, but they're probably not going to say that. You need to be prepared, though, to understand what their mission, vision, and values are. You need to understand the fiscal implications of what you're talking about. It's like every legislative bill that goes before a state or federal committee has to have a cost of the bill attached to it. You shouldn't be any different. Your conversation is that important. And you have to have a lot of options, and the options are only going to come by using objective criteria, using reason, logic, not emotion. So what do you do in that room of physicians and midwives that didn't want to look at each other? We all know, and we've been in these situations of power imbalance. And what they will propose to you in this book is called the BATNA, the best alternative to a negotiated agreement. What are you going to do if they're not going to negotiate? Are you going to try to extend the negotiation for 6 months and continue working and gather more data and say, I'm going to come back? Are you going to provide an ultimatum that says, I'm not going to do this job unless you give me $20,000 more a year, or are you going to turn in your resignation? Those are all badness. And I will tell you, in that particular meeting I've been describing to you, a midwife stood up and said, I resign, and walked out of the room. That was her badness. Okay. So we all have different badness. And what can be problematic for midwife practices is Crystal may be the person in her family who's bringing in the insurance for 5 kids. And no, Crystal doesn't have 5 kids, but she may be in a very different life circumstance than me, who doesn't have anybody that I need to support other than myself. And so it makes it very difficult to be able to have collegiality when you're trying to come up with these BATNAs, because you may not come to consensus on that. And that's okay, but you should at least talk about that in the group. What would you do if this was the ultimatum they gave you? It's okay to say, foul, that's not fair. What you said isn't appropriate. Don't be afraid to say what you believe is happening in the moment. And often when there's a power imbalance, we feel like we can't talk back. Well, you're not talking back. You're just stating observations. When I heard you say that, that statement was inappropriate because one of the things that I had to talk myself into when I spoke at an ACOG conference in San Francisco, that was probably the hardest presentation I've done in my life. The room was full in a keynote presentation, and I was debating a physician from Texas on birth centers. Can you believe it? Having a hospital birth or a birth center. And I don't know if at the time I didn't have any, I might have had grandkids. I don't remember, Crystal McKinsey. That was before I had grandkids. There's a book called Everybody Poops. If you haven't read it, you should buy it. And if you're nervous about getting into a power imbalance, read the book Everybody Poops and realize it all goes in the same toilet. There isn't any reason why you shouldn't feel comfortable talking with colleagues in an equally respectful way. We have to get out of our way thinking we don't have the power to be able to do that. So William and Yuri still work together on negotiations across the world. And then in October, probably a couple of years ago, but in October of last year, William Ury talks about this in his book. People approached him to write about his journey in being the most famous negotiator of all time. And he wrote this book called Possible. Yeah, I think he still lives in Boulder. He talks about going up into the mountains and taking long walks and thinking about how he approached different conflicts. And he talks about all these kinds of conflicts he's negotiated over his career, which is quite astounding to get a lens into some of those conversations that happened that are historical events. And these are the 3 things that he will tell you are important to successful negotiation. And the first one is called going to the balcony. And any of you that have worked with us much will hear us say this. We've adopted this approach in dealing with our clients for years now, is going to the balcony and gaining perspective. And that's basically going back to what William and Yuri said, learning about the other side. What can you learn about the view of what's going on from their perspective, but also the interaction of the 2 sides, especially if you're in the middle as a negotiator, which he often is. What is going on with both parties that are objective facts that can be brought forward as facts, not as judgmental calls, not as you're bad and you're good, but really taking time to go to the balcony and assess what's happening in that environment, in that moment. And maybe a little historical perspective can help a little bit. The next thing he talks about is creating the golden bridge, and that is how you find your way forward. It is finding the common ground. What brings the 2 parties together that they're going to be willing to talk about because it has immense importance and meaning to them. And if I go back to these conversations about midwives and doctors in conflict, which we've used, if it's about patient safety, at least between the physicians and the midwives, because they're not the C-suite thinking about the money, right? They're thinking about the collaborative model of care, and that often can have tension that erupts for a variety of reasons. As I said, you may have a new chair, you may have new residents that just came on board, you may have new midwives that are uncomfortable with patient population you're taking care of. Find a way forward through a common element that you can all agree on is the floor for both of you. And then you bring in the perspectives of the two sides and how that influences the common goal. How does that impact this or that? And the third component, which is critical to getting to consensus, is called the third side. I used to call it the third way, but the third side now makes so much more sense to me because the third side is the broader community, not in the sense of the patients that you're taking care of in Madison, Wisconsin. The third side, I mean, it could include them, but it's not just them. The third side are the people that are involved in any aspect of what you're talking about. The nurses, the ambulatory care team, the ER department, the HR department. Who might be people that this conversation impacts, right? That are critically important to the outcome and finding consensus. So this is Yuri's discussion about how to adopt a possibilist mindset so that you're taking what you think is conflict, anger, frustration, separation, and turning it into what is possible. And if you ever wanted to get high on believing conflict can bring you the highest rewards, this is the book for you, because there are so many pearls in ways to do this that we do not learn in any discipline. Maybe the lawyers learn it. Isaac had a 1-credit semester course on negotiation. It was so fun talking to him. He just finished law school with that course because he did a lot of the readings that I had from the Harvard School of Business negotiation course a couple summers ago. And we talk about Chris Voss, who's this hot in a lot of ways, very intense negotiator who does hostage negotiations. If you want to hear somebody that's amazing, listen to some of Chris Voss's TED Talks, VOSS. He comes out of this guru group of the Harvard negotiation team. And so this is another, I don't know what you call these, like whiteboards. I don't know what there's a word for these. Like it's escaping me, but this was done with Lisa Leong in a conversation with William Ury, putting in front of you what Ury believes are ways to work constructively with conflict rather than it bringing out the worst in people. So conflict can bring out the best in people. It can help us engage in our differences and learn more about each other that we never knew before, even if it doesn't relate to work. And if you lean in to the conflict with curiosity and creativity, it can transform into constructive negotiation instead of it being seen as a battle. So there are 3 traps in conflicts. And it kind of came out just a little bit in that example of the midwife group where 2 of the midwives didn't want to work with anybody. Avoidance. We do it all the time. It doesn't solve anything and it makes the situation worse, whether it's in your family, happens to me frequently, whether it happens at work. It's hard to want to bring up a difficult conversation. But if I don't bring it up, then maybe it won't get any worse, or maybe it's not as bad as I think. I don't want to come up with a solution. Somebody else will bring it up, but it will become worse if you avoid it. It can cause attack where gets elevated so quickly, or there's such a trigger that there is just really bad situations that arise, which happened with this group we worked with in the Midwest, where it was so bad that they went from 5 midwives down to 1, and they wanted to rebuild the midwife service. But lo and behold, they couldn't figure out why they all left. Well, because they were all being attacked. And you can accommodate and give in and be the midwife who clocks in, clocks out, and does nothing. You do your job, you get paid, and that's the end of what you do. And if you have read much of Bree Thumb's work related to work climate and why we lose midwives within 5 years pretty quickly, it's by accommodating to the point of being exasperated, and you don't have any energy to do anything anymore. So you just give up and you give in and you go away. So you get out of the trap by the 3 things that he talked about. You go to the balcony. You find space for yourself, for your team to get away. I really mean that. Get away, get out of the building and pause and think about the bigger picture. What's happening with your team? What's happening with the group you're in conflict with? And Yuri really does talk about taking walks, taking breaths, trying to de-emotionalize and think about what truly matters here. What really is going on here that can help us calm down a little bit, set aside our anger, and think about some perspectives of the issue. Maybe you've just let it go on so long, you've got to decompress a little bit. Then you build the golden bridge. Ask what truly matters to you, what truly matters to this team on your side, and listen to what is important to the other side. And it's even fair to say, let's start the conversation here, not with conflicts that we feel about one another, but what can we agree on? What is our bridge of common denominators that brings us to even want to have this conversation anyway? Find that common goal. And then recognize the third side, the larger whole, in the context of everybody that this impacts. We reduce conflict to sides most of the time, instead of realizing there is a bigger circle, a bigger container of people the decision will impact. And often he talks about creating the swarm, that it's not just the 2 parties that find the answer, but it's the entire community that comes in and helps find the answer. And that is actually the model that we use when we're working with people that have conflict. It's not just the midwives and the doctors, it's the administration and all the people that play into, maybe it's the billing department, the HR department, who all will make a difference in the decisions that are made in that conversation. So we're going to talk about a few more reflections, and these are things I want you to think about as you go on this journey. If you decide to get these books, what do you recognize about your current role, whether you're a defined leader or not, and what are your actual contributions in the workplace? We're talking about beyond the job you're employed to do. Maybe what's your why is the question. What techniques can you incorporate to develop new ways of engaging and leading? Are there some ideas you've heard that maybe struck an aha with you? This is something I think maybe we should try. It's not about doing it well, right or wrong. It's about going on the journey of learning these things together. And how might you help build an improved culture of collaboration? It's great to see high-functioning teams. I'm going to throw the California affiliate out there as one of them. Those midwives rock. That affiliate has not stopped for the past 20 years. They are so well organized, and I know more people bring more money, which brings more power, but they are constantly pushing policy, social justice, education, and it is when you are thriving, there's a sense of momentum that keeps things moving in a direction of improvement, not judgment of it being broken and doing something wrong. So it's about constantly assessing and continuing to sort of rethink about what you're doing and why you're doing it. So I would highly, highly encourage you to invest time and money in these 4 resources. Simon Sinek, definitely start with why. He has a lot of books out there. I think I have all of them. Leaders Eat Last is one that I read probably in 2016. He has great books for people in leadership roles. Fisher and Urey's Getting to Yes, classic, older. William Urey's Possible, and subscribing to the Harvard Business Review. There are also a number of resources. If you know about some of these, great. If not, maybe it would be something that could be helpful to you. I try to post every single day on social media something. Lots of times there are resources that come with those. We also have a monthly newsletter where we highlight some of those key monthly posts and other things going on. And there are a lot of YouTube webinars out there. Some of them are like anatomy and physiology. They never change. Some of them are like RVUs. We now have 3 RVU talks, 21, 23, and 25, to keep you updated on the ever-changing world of evaluating work. And some exciting news. We are going to launch a podcast in January. And now you know why it's being called The Possibilist. Because we really believe there is a sense of going on this journey to think a different way, to think about what is possible versus the conflict mindset that we often get in and feel stuck in, not being able to change anything, which often sets us down this path of doing nothing. So it will drop the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month, and we are very, very excited to have enough topics that will probably go for 5 years, in addition to a lot of guests that we'll be inviting on to talk about their perspectives and their experiences, which I think could be really, really fun to listen to. So we're excited about that. And now, before I finish with some more announcements, we're going to move into the drawings. We will have time for some questions and discussion, but I want to make sure we get through this. So there are 4 items we are going to have drawings for. Denise, Arden, Leslie, would somebody get out it's very easy to find on your phone, a random drawer. It's a number generator, a random number generator. While I talk about how we're going to do this, there's a 1-hour coaching session, a contract review, a resume review, and one of Joe's beautiful hand-turned Pinards behind me that we are going to have drawings for. And if you're going to use any of the services, we would like you to do that in the first 6 months of the year. So this is how we're going to do it. If you want the particular item that we're going to do, we want you to put your name and a number in the chat box. So you might want to open your chat box now. And do I have one of my colleagues with a random number generator up?
Yeah, between 1 and what?
Between 0 and 101. And so you don't have to put your name up there if you don't want to do it. That's fine. But if you do, the first one we're going to start with, and we're not going to set the timer yet because I want to explain it. We'll do the contract review. We're going to give you 5 seconds to put your name and a number in. We'll use the random number generator to select the number. Whoever's closest wins. If there are 2 numbers that are equally close, we'll pick the highest number from 0 to 101. And if 2 or more pick the same number, the closest number, we'll do 1 more random generator. So the first one we're going to do is the contract review. And if you're interested in that, put your name and a number in now in the chat box. And Denise, while they're doing that, you can pick a random number, but don't say it yet.
Got it.
And let's hear the number, Denise.
It is 45.
45. So there's a 33, a 42. So far, 42. 42. 42. Looks like 42 got it. That was easy. Laura Taylor, you want a contract review. Where are you, Laura? We would love for you to email us, okay? Because I could probably try to find you, but I want to make sure we get you. The next one we're going to do is 1 hour of coaching. So if you're interested in that, type your name and the number and go back up here. And I'll go after Woohoo Laura. You have a number, Denise?
You want me to say it?
I think it's time to say it.
73.
We have a 74. That's Ashley. 74, 75. What's the number, Denise?
73.
Okay, 74 is still the winner. 74, 74, 74, 72. We have a tie here. 72, 74, and another 72. What's the number?
73.
So oh no, the 74 wins. The number that's higher.
Okay. There you go.
What was that?
Looking.
I'm coming back looking. It's very early. You can tell us who you are. Ashley Perkins. Woohoo! 1 hour of coaching. Okay. The next one's interesting. You might not think you need a resume review, but man, I just updated mine. I try to update them every year. We usually do this for a lot of students, but we also do it for people transitioning into a career, or maybe they're going to look for a new job. So if you want a resume review, we go through 3 iterations of this. And Denise, have you picked a number?
I do have one.
Let me
Ready?
go back. No, let me go back and see where I need to start. We're done with the numbers. So what's the number?
6.
6. Okay. We have a 14, 17. So 14.
5, right?
Did we have a 5?
Kristen. Or is
No.
that?
I haven't gotten down there.
7 too.
Yep,
14.
I said 5.
Yeah,
Are you guys are ahead of me.
Kristen Rardin.
A 5. Grace is a 5.
Crystal Murphy's a 7.
Kristen's a 5. We have a 7.
Mm-hmm.
So far, 7 is the winner. It's Crystal. I think I know how to find you, Crystal, but you can send us an email. All right. The last one is a hand-turned Pinard that Joe has made. These often go for hundreds of dollars. So if you want us to mail you a hand-turned Pinard, put your number in. And let me go back up here to
A
where
couple of them.
Crystal. Okay. And we'll give you a couple more seconds because there's still some numbers popping in. I think everybody wants the Pinard, Denise. Okay. What's the number, Denise?
25.
25?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
We have a 27. That's Ellie, L. 27, 28. So 27. Somebody already figured it out. There's a 23. Oh, I think we just got closer, or did we? Or the opposite. So 27 is still it. 27. 27. I think we have a winner. Who's gonna cash in on that?
That's me. Thank you so much.
Okay. So if not only your email, would you send your address and then we'll mail it to you?
Sure thing. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. That was fun. We're really glad you hung in there with us. I'm about ready to turn it over to a Q&A, but I want to say just a few more things. First of all, we actually completely revised our website. So it's new in the world of SEO. We love Google reviews, not because we're begging you to say anything good about us, but the more Google reviews we have on business, on the Google business page, the higher we go in the SEO. So we're trying to rebuild that brand again. If you have anything you want to say about us, give us a Google review. this webinar will be uploaded probably in the next day or so if you want to share this with your friends. We want you to know we're going to have a virtual conference in 26. This will be our 4th year. We were in Anchorage, Alaska the first year and combined a virtual and in person. Then we were in Kansas City the last 2 years for an in-person only. And we now know that ACNM is coming to Kansas City in October, and we don't want to have conflict with that. So we decided for the first time ever to do a total virtual conference in July. This is a Thursday, and it will exclusively focus on business and leadership topics. We won't be bringing any clinical topics to this conference. We feel like you get a lot of that from a lot of different CE vendors. So we're really going to focus on midwifery, business, and leadership. And we want to wish you a very, very, very happy holiday. And we were going to have a very special announcement that was going to come soon. But now I can tell you officially, it's yes. William Ury will be the keynote speaker of our conference in July. And we picked the date because that is his date that he picked. And we are so incredibly honored by him saying yes. We haven't pushed it out publicly. We're still waiting for his team to sort of help us figure out the best way for public dissemination in the social media world, but we wanted you to know that. And if there were ever anybody in your lifetime you would want to hear, I promise you, it's this guy. So I'm going to end my part of the presentation. I do have other team members here from Grow Midwives. Leslie's here, Arden's here, and Denise is here. We're here to answer questions and spend this last half hour or so with anything that you want to talk about that might help you or guide you or why you're here.
Ginger, there was a question from, where did I see it? Oh, Jamie Hatcher. Are old reviews still there, or should she resubmit? Google reviews.
Oh, Google reviews. I was lost. No, a new one would be great, Jamie, because I think they live there in forever. But it's nice to have newer ones that come up because they will raise to the top. Thanks, Jamie. Any thoughts about what you heard or questions or issues that you want to talk about?
How do you know when you have, or how do you, I guess my question is, how do you know when you have really hit a wall in which you've, kept pushing the negotiations and you're not making any headway? I mean, is there any, I guess everybody has a different line in the sand, certainly, and that's individual, like you talked about. But I mean, is there any kind of signs that you would advise people to really look out for as red flags of, listen, this really probably isn't going any further?
Yeah. I think with what I've read and what I've interpreted, it starts with the BATNA, but also you'll hear William Ury talk about the WATNA. Instead of the B, it's a W. What's the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, and what's the worst alternative to the negotiated agreement? So you're thinking about the best possible outcome that you can live with and the worst case scenario that really does become your walkaway. And if you give it equal amounts of time, you've thought about the strategy, because it is sort of the beginning. The best alternative is what you hope you're going to get, and the worst is what we're talking about right now, I think, which is what is your line in the sand? What did you decide is the worst alternative if their negotiation is an impasse? And I think it's really strategic to be honest and transparent about that. Well, I'll just pick on people I know. Jamie, we've had this conversation for 6 months now. I know you're chief of the department, and I know there are people that you have to talk to, but I need a timeline at which we have both, decided that our conversations aren't going to go any further in the next year or in the next 3 months, or whatever your timeline's going to be that will activate what you're going to do. One of the things I try to help the most depleted midwives that call us, who are crying and have been demoralized, and they're privileges have been suspended and they've been reported to the licensing board is you have to get back control. If you're letting other people and the situation bring you to such a level of hopelessness and helplessness, you cannot activate what's possible. You have to find ways to rebuild, that go back, right? Go back to the balcony view. What is really going on out there, far beyond Jamie and I's discourse about what's happening in our department? What's happening for me? What's happening in the department? How much more can my family sustain or can I sustain? Re-examine, go for a walk in the Colorado mountains, which is what Yuri's going to tell you to do. Figure out if there is a bridge. Is there another commonality that maybe you haven't thought of while you were out there hiking that you can try one more time? Or is there an amount of time you're going to give? And at that point, you are done. It's okay to be done. It's okay to walk away. Sometimes we think we're a failure if we make that decision because we have so much emotion tied into it. Look, I worked in a birth center 14 years. It's where I started. The physician who I love to this day, and I saw her a couple weeks ago at a party in Topeka, Kansas. We opened the Topeka Birth Center together. And over the 14 years, I was supposed to be inheriting more and more primary care patients. And I'm not an FNP. I am a CNM. And I got more and more aggravated with the fact that I don't take care of these people. I don't like diabetes. I don't want to manage chronic hypertension. But the expectation was I should learn it. And she was there for me. I didn't care if she was there for me. I didn't want to do it. And I left a job that I had started, the birth center. I started the birth center with her and another nurse. I left families who I had delivered 2 and 3 of their babies. It was the hardest walk away I think I ever did. But I had to figure out how to get back what I needed. We all face those times in our careers where you really have to take back control instead of feeling like your control is being taken away from you. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's a lot of deep contemplation. And you have to get out of that depression and that hopelessness for your mind to let you think that way.
I would be curious, Ginger. I think this was touched on, I think briefly, just at the beginning. It's obviously not the main topic in terms of negotiation, but your perspective on like the balance between doing the job without the title because the job needs to be done versus fighting for the title, like, and potentially having boundaries, or limits around what work you'll take on because that title doesn't exist, or hasn't been given.
Yeah. I've worked with a lot of midwives who said they took it by default because nobody else would do it and they're not getting paid for it. So my answer to them is, okay, so get smart. Assume that you are being paid with a title. What should you be doing? You should be tracking the actual hours you're working and all your team members are working. You should be gathering all the I'm not going to say you in a minute. You should be gathering patient satisfaction survey data. You should be gathering some kind of benchmark outcomes. ACNM makes that very easy for you, but I think it's helpful to do AIM bundles and Joint Commission and Leapfrog if your hospital is doing that, have similar metrics. You should be looking at RVUs and fiscal contribution, and gathering that data without a leader should be the job of the team, because more practices are blindsided because they're told they're not valuable, right? That's what we read in the newspaper. We just couldn't afford them, or, whatever the excuse is. I promise you, it's not because you're not generating money. We know that you're generating money. We usually know how much money you're generating, but the story has not been told. And that story should be shared work, because if the team doesn't start realizing, Amber Price says this so well, the C-suite knows nothing about you. You are not a surgeon, you're not orthopedics, and you're not cardiology, and you're not cancer. You're not bringing in the largest amount of money that hospital gets. And the adage of they'll come back for their kids or their broken bones isn't true anymore necessarily. If you're not telling your story to somebody, then nobody, not only they don't know about you, but they don't care about you. So you talk to your team about being proactive instead of reactive. Don't wait for the day when they say X, Y, and Z. Or you have to argue against the wall, you need another midwife because of the hours you're all working but not getting paid. Your story needs to be told quarterly. It needs to be summarized annually, and it needs to be presented above your department chair to the C-suite. That's how you become recognized. And the team needs to understand the value of that story and what can they contribute. Look, we're all at different points in our lives. I don't have kids anymore, so maybe I could put the PowerPoint together and do this and that. But people have different talents and different amounts of time. But if you can find ways where the team will share the work, then the burden of being a leader, especially if you're not getting the title or the salary for it, becomes much more tolerable. But it's a hard situation to be in. And you have to be able to make the case of why you need somebody. I really believe 3 or more midwives in any practice needs a designated title, a designated lead. And that needs FTE time and it needs additional monetary money. But if they don't know why, if they don't have any idea what you're doing, then they're going to probably say, nah, our other departments don't need that, so you don't either. That's the easy answer. You haven't given them any information. I can't see the questions because I have my screen totally open to people. Is there another question out there, Arden or Leslie or Denise or whoever's asking that's in the
Yeah,
chat board?
when will registration open?
We are working with KU AHEC right now, who is the CME CNE provider. I suspect not until, I'm going to say maybe February. We're just giving you a save the date to put it on your calendar, and there will not be limited registration because it's virtual. We would love it if there's 1,000 people there to hear William Ury talk, so don't worry about it. It won't be limited.
Can I have you kind of go a little bit deeper on what we were just talking about? Like we're in a practice that we do have a really stable relationship with administration. We have a lead CNM title in name and salary and some hours. So I'm just wondering like what the next step is, like, sharing that story or like how do we decide what to share and like what's important for us to like get into the C-suite arena to make our case for like keeping us around.
Yeah, I think one really important thing to do that's often neglected is your why. Their belief of why you're there is probably going to be different than why you believe you're there, right? We think differently. And your commitment to the community is probably at a very emotional level because you are in direct patient care. They're not, right? So having some conversation with your team about reigniting why you're all there. Maybe it's what you're doing well, what you want to continue doing, and maybe you want to try something new. Maybe you want another clinic, or maybe you want to do more skills beyond core competency, or maybe you want to do research. I don't know, but think of some innovative opportunity that you could all sort of get around that helps you think forward. Otherwise, you just become stagnant, right? And maybe it's when are we going to have our next CNM FTE come on board? Or when can we have a more flexible schedule because half of us are aging and we don't want to work nights anymore? I don't know what the conversation's going to be, but I bet you if you put it out there and just stayed silent and said, can you think of anything the group might want to approach our administrative medical leadership on? Let's brainstorm about what those could be. When we do these kinds of brainstorming sessions, we often come up with 20, 30, 50 things, and we narrow it down to 3 to 5 objectives that can be accomplished in 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. So you get those wins, you see people going, oh my God, we did that. Maybe we want to have, I'm looking at Arden now, maybe we want to have a really deep dive in auditing our charts to see if there's any way we can capture even more money than we're capturing now. I don't know. But you want to do achievable things that the team's excited about that brings them some kind of value to being there. Does that help? And always try to tie it back to the mission, vision, and values of that organization. That you're there because you're part of their team. And you want to make this team know your value, but you also want to value the people who are carrying out these objectives.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions?
I put a question in the chat,
Yeah.
and I think I heard you say you can't really see that. So do you want me to read the question?
Yeah, go for it.
And then you pick up wherever you want to lead with this one. And broadly, what tools do you suggest for those of us who work on Medicaid and commercial insurance, discriminatory and inequitable treatment of midwives and place of service? So being excluded from panels, unsustainable contracted rates, lack of coverage for essential billing codes, and exclusions from home birth and birth center coverage.
Wow, you picked a big one, Lorraine. Uh, and it is getting worse, right? It's not getting better. And I'm going to default to Arden here in just a
We're
second.
winning some of the battles in Nevada, where I am now. I'm originally a New York City and New Jersey midwife, but we are certainly not winning the ultimate.
Yeah. Well, there's one strategy I'm going to give you, and then Arden, if you jump in here, maybe you have some ideas. I think it's quite fascinating, and it's a legitimate fact-based question. If you're in one of the 15 states with TMAH funding, the entire purpose of that $17 million given to those states was to do the exact thing that you just described.
And Nevada passed. We actually offered to build a team with them, and Nevada passed on even applying for those funds.
So what you can do, Lorraine, is find a neighboring state if possible, look at the map of where the states are, and begin to develop a dialogue about, hey, if this is federally funded and they're doing this next door, can't we begin a conversation here? Because here's the evidence of why they invested in it, right? You're not making this stuff up. This was years of work to create these model innovation pilots. And I think it's worth using existing evidence. It's objective evidence to ask the questions and say, who wants to go on this conversation with me? Let's talk about it. And maybe it's the individual insurers that you're approaching. I don't know. But Arden, do you have other thoughts?
No, I think those are good. And as far as like Medicaid, just for example, Medicaid reimbursement rates, the only way to effectively change Medicaid reimbursement states is, or Medicaid reimbursement rates. Sorry, my brain is not, can't talk tonight. Is to, I don't really know. It's hard because you have to lobby, you have to have a good lobbyist, you have to push Medicaid, you have to push Medicare, but with Medicare cutting the provider fees, the physician fee schedule every single year, Medicaid's also cutting reimbursement rates. So are the commercial payers. I was just having this conversation with somebody earlier today that with reimbursement rates at an all-time low across all specialties, what does that say about the status of our healthcare? And about the ability in health insurance premiums are at an all-time high, reimbursement rates are at an all-time low. And how do we make the change? And I think that is the $64,000 question right now is how do we make the change? Who do we lobby to make the change? Who do we lobby to get more money in the budget? Because that's what it takes to make the change.
it is one of the things, Lorraine, that the California midwives are very aggressive at working on. So maybe a piece, I don't know if we have any California folks on here, but maybe one of the things you could do, because they're not too far from you, is to talk to the CMA and see if you can get any ideas from them about how to activate the affiliate. There's power in numbers. There's power in more of you talking as an organized voice than you and your buddy in your practice trying to negotiate with Nevada Medicaid. So you might think about that and see if the Nevada affiliate is active in a way that wants to do something.
And then with the commercial payers, it's about negotiation. And sometimes, oftentimes, the commercial payers won't negotiate with you when you initially get the contract. It's a take it or leave it. But the majority of the commercial contracts right now are 1 year contracts. They used to be 3 year contracts, now they're 1 year contracts. So keep an eye on your contract and you can start negotiating 90 days before the automatic renewal date. And that's when you start the conversation with the commercial payers to renegotiate your contract, to have a carve out rate for global maternity or whatever codes you bill. Maybe they won't typically do a carve out rate for E&M codes or preventive medicine, but larger codes they will. And so it's showing the evidence, showing your number of transfers is low, your outcomes, the evidence behind you requesting the increase. And maybe the increase is requesting from 80% reimbursement to 100% reimbursement of the physician fee schedule. But you have to be able to go into them with the evidence as to why you should receive that and really open up the conversation. Make friends with the payer rep, invite them to visit your practice, pull out anything you can in your arsenal to negotiate those higher rates.
Leslie, you had a successful experience with Arden with some payers, didn't you?
Yes, it took a while, over a year, to get an increase, and it basically got to the point where we had to threaten to go out of network. Because once you go out of network, then you can renegotiate it. If they would like you to go back in network, you get to renegotiate from the beginning. You don't have to start from where you're at. And the problem where we were in was a previous practice manager had not renegotiated contracts for 10 years or longer. And so we were 10 years behind getting those little incremental raises. And they have at the time it was, I think, 3% was the maximum they would give you, but we were behind by like 20. We were never going to catch up. And so threatening to go out of network. They don't like that because it makes them look bad when people go out of network, especially we were a birth center, so we were the only birth center in our area. They like to have a birth center in their, package that they sell to the employers. And then we also had patients with that insurance let them know that we were going out of network and we were having difficulties with negotiating and asked for their help to call their insurance companies and their employers and tell them that they want the birth center to remain in network. And it worked. We got an increase, not as much as we wanted, but way more than they were willing to initially give.
Yeah, being organized, going with data.
Yeah, lots of data.
Lots.
You have to keep all your numbers. And what we did was take those numbers and compare them to state numbers. So to show them, our C-section rate compared to those same patients, the 34% C-section rate in our state, then we saved them just in C-section dollars. I think it was $15 million. And that did not include the NICU admissions, which, as most of you know, is a much bigger expense. So you could take that number and multiplied even more. And at the same around that same time or right after is when the Strong Start data came out. So we were able to say we participated in it. And so you should always make sure that if there's anything like that, that you can join and participate and do. Being part of gathering data and doing research is going to always work in your advantage. It's a pain to have to record everything after a birth, but it's very important when you're going to talk to anybody, legislators, anybody, if you have your actual real numbers.
That leads right into one of the questions I haven't pulled up now, which was the four things that we basically it becomes your pitch deck, which is a 15 slide deck of how you're going to tell your story. It's another conversation, but the four things you need to do is collect your outcomes, what Leslie just said. The outcomes from the ACNM benchmarking is good. Look at AIM bundles, look at Leapfrog, and look at Joint Commission. What's going on in your state, in your hospitals, and collect that data and have a quarterly analysis of that data. Actual time worked, not what your contract says you work. So that's patient-facing hours, and that's hours of work that aren't patient-facing, but are hours you've committed to your job. There's call hours that you're working, and there's call hours that maybe you're at home on call. Those should be differentiated. So your actual hours work needs to be tracked for your entire team because you are likely working far above what your contract says your job is. And you want to be able to talk to them about that. The WRVUs and the accounts charged, those would come out of a report from the electronic health record that you're using. Your practice manager or whoever oversees your EHR, your EMR, has either locked you out of it or can show you where it is and give it to you. But that is your information that you should have access to if they are using your NPI number for billing for services. You also want to collect Press Ganey or whatever the patient satisfaction survey data is that's coming out of your system. If there's none in the ambulatory side, could you guys create an acceptable, approved document for ambulatory services to be able to have that as a complementary document? And does the Press Ganey drill down to Crystal's name, or is it just CNM on call, OBHG, whatever it might be? But having that data is going to be really helpful. Did I name four things? I think I'm getting tired too. Did we get the four? The outcomes, satisfaction, time worked, and money. Those are the four. That is the basis of what the summary of what you guys do. That should be your evolving history for whoever the audience is. You know what, Kim, you put me on the spot of asking me an example of my why, right? Because some of you know that I've done some stuff with. It takes a little bit of time to get those sentences well phrased. But I would say my why for Grow Midwives is to really provide a voice to the people who want to scale up and sustain the midwifery profession. We're not doing this to make money, I promise you that. We're not doing that just because nobody else is out there doing contract reviews, although I think it's provided a great benefit and elevation to midwives finding their voice. But the why for forming this business with Leslie in the beginning was to help midwives find their voice and find ways to work through challenges and troubles that they were having, and to give you the tools to move ahead and do it yourself. So that's a quick why, Kim. Now you got to think of your why. But I appreciate the question. Anything else that you guys have? We have time for one more question, then we're hitting 8:30.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm in a place of moving from clinical practice as a practice owner and community birth midwife toward like kind of my next season leadership of academics. So I know that you have been involved with really preserving the master's pathway and advising some new programs. What would you say about leadership in the educational setting?
Oh boy, I was just talking about this before I hit the record button, so I have to be really careful. I started the Kansas University Graduate Nurse Midwifery Education Program as a master's exit track. It, over time, became a mandatory DNP exit track, as many programs did across the country. I think the last time I surveyed this, we were about 50-50, with some of them being a stop out either direction, like Michigan. Thank you, a big five who's allowing that. It's the Dean's Club. The deans control the specialty track exit degrees, period. It is not what the midwives want. It is not what we think is best. It is not going to increase our workforce to have DNP programs that get you out 1 to 2 years later with a higher debt. We know from our contract reviews, you will not be paid a higher salary in any discipline with a DNP unless it's required. And the nurse anesthesia people and not the PAs, the pharmacists all require it now, but they have equivalent salaries. It does nothing for your salary. It gives you a higher debt, takes you longer to get out there. And we need midwives now. The core competencies have not changed. And I don't know about you, but as a new grad, doing a quality improvement project in your first couple of years is probably not your priority. It's making sure you don't kill anybody and then learning what the issues are so you can do a quality improvement project as you get your feet on the ground and you really feel like you're a stronger clinician. So now you've heard it. I wrote a scathing letter about the KU program's trouble they're in right now to ACME today. Because there are no CNMs on the faculty at KU right now, and there are DNP students there. So we will see what happens. But yeah, I agree, Jolene. I know Jolene very well, so I can be really honest with her. We're not in this for the dollars, but we are in it to be paid fairly. We should be in it to be paid fairly. I'm not asking us to be paid the salary of a CRNA. I'm asking us to be paid our value. And that does vary based on the setting that you're in. But there are variables that impact that for birth centers, and that low reimbursement is killing our birth centers. How y'all are staying open, I have no idea. And I worked in one for 14 years. It is the most difficult thing to do now, unless you have philanthropic money or a venture capitalist comes in and tries to sell you on their lemonade. I'll just stop there. They are not doing as well as they should be doing, that we know the evidence says the cost savings they can provide. So let's hope TMAH in those states can lift up these birth centers in the states. I don't know. We'll see. I'm sorry, Jamie. I kind of thought back on your time in Maryland. What was that, Best Beginnings you were at? I can't remember. Yeah. Okay.
It was Special Beginnings. Yeah.
Special Beginnings. Yeah.
And 2 birth centers out here in California.
Yeah. They are closing right and left, unless you've got philanthropic money coming in. So, well, thank you all for being here. We really, really do appreciate the outpouring of interest, and we wish you well. We're here. If you ever want to chat, send us an email. We do have resources. We do a lot of things and not necessarily have a cost associated with it. So if we can be of help, let us know, and have a wonderful, wonderful holiday as we have the next couple weeks approach. Bye, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.